I appreciate the introduction. And welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world today. So as Len mentioned, today's topic really will be covering the ACMP standard and the efforts to date. I would like to use much of today's call to really provide you with an update of what I would consider to be the very active efforts that are in place to support the development of the ACMP standard. Now, for those of you who may have been a participant on the standard update that I provided back in late spring, you yourself will likely see how much progress we've made since we last met. So I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity to provide the update. In today's call, I will look to revisit our intended purpose and the role of the standard in terms of the overall ACMP objectives. Get into more detail in terms of what's involved, the scope and the associated process and the milestones that we are looking to achieve. And finally, we'll set the stage for some of the upcoming activities as we move into the next phase of the standards, public review phase and commentary before we look to release it publicly. And of course, we will leave you with your role and what we will be looking to you all to do to help. As well as any additional resources, and we'll do our best to leave some time for the question and answer. So let's start with the purpose and intended benefits. As you can see, as part of the second bullet on this slide in particular, I'll hone in on the standards development process itself. Will work to define the change management profession, and that's a fairly bold and broad objective that we've set forth for ourselves. And in order to do so, it really is part of making sure that we have our arms around the accepted practices and processes that are used and will be bought in by the change management practitioners across all of the different industries and organizations and roles that ACMP represents. Ultimately, we are looking to be the thought leaders and implementation body that will establish the industry standard. And from a practitioner standpoint and from the organization standpoint, it really is with the objective of enabling our practitioners' career growth and making sure that we are setting the stage for them to be successful in that. Allowing our hiring managers out there and those that are responsible or have the obligation to be procuring change management services to make sure that they know what they're buying and that they understand what comes with someone who claims to have the change management skill set. And finally, by providing a common language for change across all of these industries and professions in order to really work towards our continuous improvement efforts and to be able to build the profession. And most importantly, I think for our membership is that the standard itself will serve as the basis for the professional credential and certification. And that point is we can really start to see that more and more come to life and know what's involved there. Picking up on the last point, I felt, having been involved in multiple certification efforts before, I really feel that it was important that we start to crystallize for our membership how the work that we're doing now will ultimately feed into the greater objectives of the overarching certification model that's being put forth. And so I will spend a bit of time on this slide just to make sure that for those of you who took the time, you can not only understand obviously the progress we've made just on the standard itself, but how this really does come together more holistically. And we, I think, collectively need to inherently understand the importance of what it is that we're doing and how we've gone about defining the standard itself for the overall profession, such that when we move to the next stages of this and we get to the point of rolling the parallel components, that there is sound credibility in the system. So as we build the engine and the machine behind it, that credibility and that professional standard can be backed with all of the effort that's gone into it, and then the individuals that have bought into this and that will go out and sell it for us. So let's start with the work that's been done to date, and I'll focus just in terms of the top box. There is a sequentialing here that we've presented. When we look back to probably about a year ago, the efforts launched to support overall market research. That was a very important stage in this effort in that we went out to, and when we say we, credit is due to my predecessors in the subcommittees that did the work feeding into the standard. But that process really was about learning more about where change management practitioners are, what their needs are to support their day-to-day work. So this was, a comprehensive effort of surveying and interviewing key stakeholders in the market in order to really understand how practitioners and organizations actually use and apply change management, and more importantly, how they value change management. Through that, we were able to collect key data as to where our CM professionals are and where they're working based on some of the job trends. Those results were really key input into adapting the processes that would then, in turn, be most relevant to the needs of our change management professionals. And each of the steps along the way serves as a step into the next process. So that market research effort was really critical in terms of narrowing the funnel of what it is we were trying to accomplish. That fed into our practice analysis, and I apologize if I'm being redundant for those of you who may have been involved in much of this, but it's a reiteration of the importance of that work. So the practice analysis phase itself really, as I mentioned, narrowed the field in terms of helping provide the required clarity around what tasks change management professionals perform, the knowledge and the skills, the abilities that are needed to perform these tasks, in a competent manner. And, practice analysis or job analysis, as many may be familiar with that term, it really is a standard approach to how you go about going out and comprehensively understanding, job descriptions, positions, professions. So taking that best practice and applying it to the work that we were doing under ACMP was an important step. This work was, as I mentioned, conducted by a separate committee of change management practitioners with a wealth of knowledge that they brought to the table, but was also validated and included the participation and input through many stakeholders and supported with interviews, and was ultimately capstoned with a survey, and again, to go out there and solicit the opinions of many. The output of that effort resulted in a framework of characteristics and what you see up here in terms of the tasks and the skills and the required proficiencies of change management practitioners. And to really provide the basis and the content areas that my group was then able to. And the thoroughness of that effort and the diligence and the rigor that was put into that step really did bode well for the team of us that had to pick up the work in the professional standard. So as you can see, there was a lot of work that's just very not given its justice just through the few words that I've got on the blue box. But that really takes us to our current state when we look at the professional standard itself. And so when you consider the development of standards, for those that may be familiar, a professional standard really is an effort that, that built on the practice analysis to capture and to start to better articulate those key process areas and the practices that are performed in change management. There was also, and there continues to also be, that effort to define the key definitions and the terms that are applicable to the profession. And we're, through every step, we're really working towards the objective of clarifying the role of the church, of the individuals performing and the change management profession as a whole. I will touch on the very specific steps in a subsequent slide, but important to, for the purposes of contextualization of the greater goal, this step itself is what puts the wrapper around what we've learned through the previous steps, and to really start to narrow the focus on how one would go about being certified. Ultimately, that's the goal we're working towards. So as we continue through this storyline, we can't just leave it at that. It's not enough to simply just create the standard and sit on it and hope for the best and that it would stick. Rather, as I've mentioned before, what I've talked through is really just been the building blocks towards our ultimate goal of certification, of creating a professional certification. And as we look at the experience and the education and the assessment components, we have actually gone ahead and launched some parallel work streams as it relates to those steps. And so when you consider the three legs of the stool for any best practice certification model, you would involve the the job or the direct hands-on experience of an individual, which is what the experience box entails. You would also consider the training and the education that one brings to the table in their capacity. And finally, the process of validating, or rather confirming that that experience and training meets the standard for which we've identified. So, as I've mentioned, the standard, albeit to step into the process, it also does serve as the anchor for going about and validating the experience in the educational component, and that being assessed through more of a formal assessment. So as you can see, and based on some of the bullet points on this slide, we are diligently working towards targeting for an ACMP certified change management professional certification exam to be released next September, whereby our successful applicants and those that choose to take the exams and successfully pass the exam are then awarded a CCMP, so a certified change management professional. There will be more to come on these other two topics as part of subsequent communication efforts. But for me, as I said, anytime I try and take one piece of the puzzle, it's important for me to understand the whole puzzle. And I hope this really does set the stage for how the work that we have been doing under the standard space feeds into the overarching objectives of our work. We'll keep going, and I anticipate if there's questions, we can come back to the materials. So what does that mean? With that as a backdrop, just trying to change my slide here. I'm not getting the slide to move. One moment, apologize. We have, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so with that as a backdrop, let's go back to the topic at hand, which is the actual standards development itself and the steps that we've taken. So what you see on this view are the more specific steps that, and the activities that we've taken. As I mentioned, a group prior to me went through the market research and practice analysis activities that were completed in the late spring timeframe. And you'll see the subset of activities that they accomplished and completed, again, with the final step of the practical analysis being the draft of the content areas for the standards development. A team of about 22 individuals were pulled together in June to officially kick off the ACMP standards development work. And in the June timeframe, we vetted and nominated and came together with a group of solid professionals who brought together the skills needed to be able to support this effort. And boy, did we ever get a terrific group of individuals who have been incredibly just supportive through this process. After pulling the group together, we did go about and do some training and onboarding activities in July, and we worked with our partner, the communicators, who have been helping guide us through this process to make sure that everyone understood the baseline and what we were working towards with some best practice guidance in terms of how the standard itself was to come together. We did go ahead and meet as a group in the mid-August timeframe in a face-to-face setting, at which point I would say we declared a formal initiation of the development of the draft standard itself. Per process, and to make best use of everyone's times and expertise, we took a very divide and conquer approach. We went through an effort when we were together to launch the standard development to make a determination of the different process areas, and then more importantly the allocation of how we were going to assign our subgroups. Through multiple iterations from that mid-August timeframe through right up until as we speak, there have been a substantial number of iterations, both within the subgroups themselves, who are very self-directed and disciplined group of individuals, as well as where it merited the needs across the various subgroups to make sure that there was that ongoing reconciliation and to address any potential conflicts, and to be very proactive about making sure that we were unified as a collective standard. And like I said, between August and primarily the end of October, there was a fairly iterative process and, weekly checkpoints and that ongoing effort by each of the individuals in the subgroups to bring together what I would say is a draft standard that came together near the end of October. That moved us into what we considered our formal editing and unification process, whereby we had our technical editor and some support resources, along with communicators, pull together and reconcile any disconnects, go through a formal editing process to bring it to the point that we are in today, which is in the final stages of the review of the draft itself. As we speak, it's coming hot off the presses. We are actually planning to meet as a virtual team this Saturday, so December 14th, to reconcile what is about 200 open feedback points across the group. So everyone went through it with a fine-tuned comb, and we were able to whittle down to about 200 feedback points that we will go through as a group and work to get consensus around the direction of how some of that feedback needs to be addressed. We will also be making a determination as to the readiness of the draft standard itself to then formally move into what we will consider the public review phase. The public review phase itself will take us through the April timeframe, whereby we'll meet again as a working group at the third plenary, and we'll iterate through with the intent to have a final standard by June. And as I mentioned, the remaining activities are actually what we would consider the parallel activities to support the certification in order to move towards the formal definition of the credential itself and the education and training components of that. All of the while, we have continued to status and communicate and liaise with the board of directors, as well as to preserve the scope of what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and making sure that we've stayed to task there. So as you can see, many activities, and through the lens of how the work that we're doing in the standards again feeds into the other components of this. From a timing perspective, I already did talk through many of the key points here, but I did want to present the key milestones that we've been working towards. As you can see, we are, after having achieved many of the prior activities of the nomination and the member selection and the onboarding, and where we're at now with this initial standards draft, it's coming very quickly. Is what we're moving into the initial comments phase, and that's the public review and commentary phase. So won't drain all the bullets on this slide, other than to just set the context as we move into the next phase of work in terms of why it's so important that we now move to the broader membership and engage to be able to really drive this through to finality. So that takes me to what I think is the reason I think the timing of this call is so imperative. As we move into a public review, it becomes more and more important that we start to broaden the reach once again. As I stated earlier, so much of the work that's been done, whether it was the efforts under the market research or the practice analysis or the standards component, has leveraged an approach that has included both engaging the broader community through the surveying and interviewing, et cetera, of the stakeholders, as well as with a more focused group. And the standards component has been no different. So the work that has been done by the 20+ individuals of the standard working group is very nearing to prime time. And critical to the success of the standard is this public review and comments phase. This, as you can see, in terms of the purpose and the way it's been defined, it's about both qualifying and quantifying the content that we've developed to date. And this is by going out to the actual line level change management practitioners around the globe, and to extend the reach to make sure that as we look to move this to a public domain and use it as the basis for the certification itself, that we can have 100% confidence that we have engaged appropriately with our public, and that becomes whereby we look to our membership as you are key to this process. So let me tell you how. As you can see, I've tried to really set up or communicate the key activities that are involved with the public review and commentary. As you saw on the timeline slide, that is really from a January to an April window. In January, and I think we're working towards a January 6th date once everyone is back from the holidays, I suppose, here. We will make available the opportunity for our ACMP membership to be given an advance access to review and provide commentary. That process actually has started as of already. We are collecting email addresses as we speak in terms of anyone who may be interested in being able to provide an advance notification and to do some of that commentary. That said, the formal process actually will kick off on the second part of the chevron here in terms of when ACMP and this group is ready to provide a link that we can take out to our members and friends and family to be able to actually access the standard itself in the form of a Word document to be able to provide the review and commentary. At that point is where we're really looking for help in terms of being able to take each of you, each of our membership. We've been working on a diligent communications approach behind the scenes here to go out and solicit participation through our networks, our respective networks, by being able to draw in individuals who have an equal desire and vested interest in being able to help define the profession. And in their way through which they can do that is by being able to spend some time to review the standard itself. As individuals take that step and express their interest, and we give them access to the link, a reviewer will individually go through the effort of actually providing the feedback. They'll work with the link provided. And there is a fairly long window of opportunity through to the end of April mid-April timeframe to be able to provide that feedback. And I'm not saying that once you open the link, you let it sit on your hard drive and take the entire 3 months. But what we're doing is giving ourselves enough of a time frame through which we can really work to hit some high numbers and achieve the targets that we're looking to achieve. We will reconvene as a standards working group in that early April timeframe to start to assess and review and incorporate feedback that's been provided. And of course, this will be monitored and reviewed through the process, just in terms of where we are with our desired objective. And we will, through that process, work as a standards working group, again, to go through the phase of being able to service the body that will reconcile the feedback and assess how it falls within the scope of the standard that's been defined, with the ultimate goal of being able to revise and publish a final standard at the end of June, so June 2014. And if you recall from a prior statement, we're looking at September to be able to release the certification exam. So 4 months of us being able to open this up to a public and to be able to solicit the feedback such that we can take the feedback and vet it, review it, and incorporate it to be able to meet that June timeframe. Throughout the process, from a reviewer, through the lens of an individual reviewer, there will be the support infrastructure in place through ACMP to be able to provide any support or questions as they may arise, as individuals take this upon them to take the time to provide the feedback. And we don't anticipate that it's just a one and done activity, and that if people have questions, we will make sure to engage. So that is the process itself. How you can help, as I mentioned many times, the public review and commentary really is going to stem from our ACMP membership as well as from the broader change management profession. And at this point, because of where we're at, we really are looking to you by way of our members to support these efforts, to not just take the time to do it yourself, but to engage with others as well. And when we look at what's in it for you, it really is to have that direct opportunity to make a direct impact on your own profession. And whether it's through providing direct input to the standard itself, or by promoting this effort by default when you go out and solicit the help of others who may not be ACMP members at this point, but the standard review process allows for an added marketing opportunity. It's really something that we do draw on our membership to be able to help support. So to break it down in terms of three main takeaways and three specific ways that we can have that you individually can help move the standard to the next level. The first is what I just walked through on the previous slide in terms of being able to provide input to what is produced by way of the draft standards that will be available in early January. The second is to go out and identify 10, and by no means do you need to stop at 10. If you have more friends and family that are relevant and would find this to be a valuable exercise, please go out and identify those individuals, and we'll make sure to get them the link and to give them the same opportunity to provide the input to the draft standard. And then finally, the third activity, or the third ask that we have, is to continue to actively support and promote not just the request for feedback, but also the overall ACMP efforts within your own respective networks. And that is an ongoing ask that I think will continue to build the goodness of ACMP's efforts and contributions back to the profession. So that actually does, before I wrap up here, there are the deck I believe will be sent out. And so the standard review, as well as access to myself or the ACMP website, are additional resources that you can link to if you have any questions coming out of this discussion. And then, as I mentioned, and we mentioned earlier, is really oh, I'm sorry, I think it's flashing, is before we close, I did want to recap and give you a sneak preview of how everything I've talked through will actually start to come alive at the annual conference. So first and foremost, if you have not registered, please do take the time to register for the conference. There's many exciting activities planned. But more specific to the topic at hand, as I mentioned previously, there's the two additional work streams that are focused on developing both the application portfolio and the education provider program. And this is what you'll start to hear more about as we come to the conference itself. But just to re-baseline everyone here is that for people who are actually interested in seeking the CCMP credential itself, they'll be able to complete the application and submit the required portfolio this spring, as early as this spring. And that for those applicants who actually achieve the successful verification by the ACMP requirements, they will receive their designation, and that will fully be owned and branded by ACMP, which is actually the required input to qualify somebody to sit for the CCMP certification examination. So once you've achieved the validation of those requirements, the applicants will then have to take and pass the CCMP exam within a set time frame. And as I mentioned previously, the date for that release is planned for the September time frame. So, for those individuals who complete the exam process and go through the effort, the uniqueness of this year and at the conference, and if for those that are in the early adopter phase of this, you actually will have the added bonus of being able to retain your credential number. So when considering being literally the first group of people hearing about this, if that's something that motivates and drives you, you could actually be, CCMP #1 and be the first person ever to receive it. So if that in itself doesn't motivate you to hurry up and go and register and start planning accordingly, then I do hope that that's a point of encouragement for others. So, lots of what we have talked about by way of the standard does feed directly into where we're going, and that you'll start to see more about at the conference itself. So with that, I actually will move into question and answers.
Great, Samarine. We've had several questions which we've kind of answered on the fly, but it would be good to hear at this point, again, reiterate how those that are not on the committee can get to see and interact with the standards review process? I've had a couple of questions that keep coming through on that.
So specifically, how to is this in direct response to, I just need clarification, providing
Right.
feedback on the standard itself or understanding what the standards group's been doing to date? Sorry.
Is it possible for those that are not on the committee to see the drafts of the standards?
Yeah, we are, like I said, a couple of weeks just away from being able to release it. So if someone is interested in seeing the current version, reach out to myself directly, and I'll be happy to work with you. Just recognizing that, as I mentioned earlier, we've got about 200 open feedback points that we're hopefully looking to reconcile over the next couple of weeks. So if there's a sense of urgency between now and January 6th, reach out directly at swgchair@acmpinfo, and that's available in the deck. But if it's more a matter of wanting to be one of the first people to review it, then that should be available in that first week of January.
Great. There was a question of what time frame could we expect to know what the Qualified Education Training Provider Program content requirements will be? And I believe that one I might be able to answer.
Yes, please.
We anticipate having that program outlined and available to our members by the first week of March. That is that's our timeline, so that we will be able to fully present this to all of our attendees at the ACMP Change Management Conference in Orlando. We also had another question from Gerard Rennick, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, which is a very good question, and I want to address it here. The question is, what other organizations who may or may not have started established change management standards has ACMP worked with? ACMP has had dialogue with a number of other organizations, professional organizations, focused on change management. There's only one other that is a true change management professional organization that has worked on establishing a certification along with a standard, a professional membership organization. And ACMP and that organization, CMI, have had introductory talks, have agreed at a very high level to continue to collaborate and exchange information to advance the practice and profession of change management. And that's at the very high level what I can share with you at this point. When it comes to complementary disciplines that are not solely focused on the profession of change management, we continue to engage those organizations, and we will include them in our outreach to gain feedback and comment on the standard as how change management would complement their discipline. And Samarine, if you have anything you would like to add to that question, happy to have you enhance that answer.
I don't, I actually.
Okay. Go back down here and see if we've got anything. All right, so we've got a couple more questions coming in right now, quite a few. Do you plan to translate the body of knowledge in other languages than English? And the answer to that is yes. The time frame for doing that has not yet been established. But ACMP is a global organization, and as such, while the first publication, the first change management body of knowledge will be published in English, business English, we will look at adding future editions with translations. Okay. Samarine, could you please repeat your email address?
Sure, and I'm happy to put it even into this box if people are. It's swgchair@acmp.info. And I just put it into, oh, I'm sorry, I need to put that out to everybody.
Okay, great. There are several questions on the application portfolio requirements for the CCMP exam. And at this time, it's a little premature to get into any of the actual details. However, our members will be made aware and informed about this throughout the entire process. Beginning at the first of the year, we will be announcing the scope of the program, et cetera, and we will certainly keep you up to date with more of the details. Just suffice it to say that we will have a product for you to engage with by the end of March 2014. Okay. There was another question here. Will non-members be able to write the exam? That is a definite yes. The Certified Change Management Professional credential is not a members-only credential. That is, we are establishing this as the credential for the profession, and it will be available to members and non-members. Leanne Douglas asked, was Sumrine saying that the next ACMP conference is where people will be able to apply for validation of requirements for certification? Sumrine, you want to reiterate that?
Yeah, so and actually, I'm going to need a little help here, Lynn, because this actually ties to the other work streams that we've got here. But for those that are seeking the credential, they'll be able to complete the application and submit those portfolios in the spring, so going into the conference. And then that will basically determine the qualification to be able to sit for the exam, which is planned for September.
Great. Sammy Woods has a great question. How will you filter and weigh the value of the public inputs?
It's a great question, and I think that when we talk about the scope, was there more to that question? Sorry, Lynn, I cut you off.
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so as we go back to, that's why this process has been so important when considering the scope definition of the standard itself that was set forth by the board going into this. So the boundaries upon which this standard represents has been set, and there have been a number of instances whereby we've gone back and tried to make a determination, and in some cases have had to deal with it on a case by case. That said, we do have the framework and the boundaries that have come through both the practice analysis and the scope definition of the standard that will serve as the baseline. For anything that comes within that framework, we will work as a standards working group to be able to weigh, to assess where it fits in, as well as to go back in terms of the previous discussions in the subgroups themselves. So the standards working group itself has been empowered to make some of those decisions. Whereby there is not consensus, then we will go back and take that to the board. Anything that falls outside of the realm of the framework itself and the boundaries would not be considered for that purpose. And so it is a great question, and I think there's not a blanket answer. Rather, I think it depends on the nature of feedback that comes in and within the context of some of the decisions that have been made to date.
Great. We have a question on the clarity regarding the process we'll take to ensure that external validity of the change management standard. Is there an external body that will undertake some form of accreditation? And I believe this speaks to following ISO standards outlines. If Sumrine, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, if I understand the question, we have part of the reason for, I think, also engaging the communicators, and I noticed a question. The communicators is actually a professional entity that we've been working with that has substantial experience in this realm, in the certifications world. So where I was going with that is that they have been able to provide us with much of that guidance through this process, although it is our own standards working group and membership that has been driving from a content standpoint. We have leveraged the ISO guidelines and standards, and in some cases we've actually even referenced them within the standard to be able to build and leverage from that experience itself. Over time, this will evolve in terms of where we go with that, with the ISO, to be determined, but this has not been done in complete isolation. Rather, we have leveraged both subject matter expertise in the certification space as well as existing standards.
Great. Now we have a question here. How is ACMP engaging with stakeholders beyond change practitioners? For example, executives and leaders that would sponsor the change discipline within a company. Stated differently, how do we get pull for certification beyond those seeking it for personal development?
Well, part of our stakeholder, I will say, I mean, the immediate opportunity for that really is through the public review cycle. And, you know, one of the key drivers there is it's not just change management professionals who do it in their day to day, but stakeholders actually broadens the definition in terms of where the relevance comes in. So as you as individuals go to identify, you know, your 10 or however many, I think that that is a very important stakeholder audience that should be invited to provide that feedback as part of the public review. The other part we did include, you know, as we were and was in consideration as part of developing the standard, is also the relationship with change management within the context of project management and the associated processes. And so there has been some from a content development as well factored into that. And when we talked about stakeholders, and I'm starting to get into the details of the standard itself, but it has been a consideration through the development of the standard and will equally be a consideration as we move into the solicitation of public review and commentary.
Okay, great. We have another question. Will you involve ACMP local chapters to identify country qualifications and/or credentials to facilitate applicant acceptance across universities? We have different requirements, and I wonder if we will be biased toward American educational credentials.
And I'll have to defer to you there because I think it gets into the application
It
process.
does, and into our entire marketing communication outreach. Yes, we will leverage not only ACMP chapters, but also several of our social networks and our stakeholders to ensure that we are gaining their feedback and understanding their feedback on the standards, which will then inform the development of the certification exams, etc. And we definitely are cognizant of how important it is as a global organization to bring those touch points in to ensure that we provide value back to our global participants. There's a question, will ACMP share all the comments provided by the public?
You know, we've had discussions about that, and I apologize, Jason, I don't have the final answer on that in terms of the transparency of how it may be grouped, but I apologize. That is something that I would like to table and follow up if we could get the name of the individual who asked.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we've just about got all of the questions answered. If you have another question, please. So we know that we're going to share all the comments. If you have any other questions, please type them in. Again, we're very excited about being able to debut this to our members coming up. And we have several opportunities to not only reach out to our members, but also to complementary organizations, social networks, and really provide them with the information that this is their opportunity to help shape the profession of change management. It's going to be an exciting, as I call, March to March, so that we are fully providing our members and the change management community with an exceptional product by which they can continue to provide value and escalate their career paths on with the standard. Okay, has there been, can we influence colleges and universities in developing programs to support preparation for change management practitioners? Kathy Gallagher asked that question, and the simple answer is yes. We have many opportunities, and academia is one of our stakeholder groups by which we will be reaching out to them when we have the standard released to ensure that as they are continuing to develop their change management portfolio programs. We are bringing them, we're bringing them into our discussions, and they are bringing us into their discussions, so that we are really looking at a collaborative effort, not only with universities here in North America, but across around the world. And I believe, Sumrine, you spoke earlier about collaboration with PMI in the context of how we were looking at project management in terms of the overall standard. There's a question of, has there been any collaboration with PMI?
So not PMI per se, but when we look at change management as a profession within the context of project management as a profession and delineating the roles and responsibilities. So when we talk about the process areas, that has more to do with the function of a project management professional as opposed to the entity that supports their certification.
Great.
Sorry if I misspoke there, if it was misinterpreted.
That's okay. And Jennifer, you are very welcome. We appreciate the opportunity to have this, to be able to speak with all of our members, as this has been this has been the founding activity for ACMP, along with building our community. There have been some passionate volunteers. The Standards Working Group has been dedicated to getting this endeavor moving forward, and I'm really happy that we can share our progress. The ACMP Board of Directors has been leading this organization, really focused on getting this out in front of the members and the community all along. So, all right. If there are no other questions, we're coming up at the top of the hour. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, but I do want to once again remind everyone that this recording and the deck and all of the questions that we've collected here today will be answered and posted in the ACMP Members Only Resource Library. You can access that right off the front page. And if there are no other questions, I'll give it just a couple more seconds, but if there are no other questions, we can conclude our webinar, and I hope that you will join us again in January for Luc Lapante's social media members only webinar. It will be a fascinating discussion regarding social media and change management and how the two work together.